Back again is the seminal development today where a conservative, market-friendly publication like the Wall Street Journal, part of our parent company empire, by the way, chastising the president for getting sidetracked on issues or then going after his own staff or Justice Department, you name it, for doing things that get in the way. Now, the Journal arguing that it is getting on those sidetracks, tweeting or otherwise, that hurts the president himself and the very people with whom he works. Well, obviously, it raised a lot of eyebrows today in and outside the financial community, and a sign that there might be some division in the ranks. Separately, the Washington Post had a story about a number of Republicans that said every time the president is not talking about tax cuts or reforming health care is a missed opportunity. To Mary Kissel, Wall Street Journal editorial board. Mary, there have been other moments where the Wall Street Journal has called the president to task on things that are distractions. But this was a deadly sort of an item-by-item attack on the president hurting himself. What did you make of that? What was the message in that?
I think it was a simple message, Neil, in that the president is his own worst enemy. He was elected with a huge mandate here from his conservative base to do fundamental tax reform, to do health care reform, and yet we see the same kind of undisciplined behavior that we saw on the campaign trail. Now, that might have been fine during the campaign, and the president might have said, well, that worked for me during the campaign. But now that he's president, he has to get things done. Critics out there might say, well, you know what, health care reform wasn't killed by a Trump tweet, it was killed by the Republican Congress. But, you know, the president also has another function, which is to persuade the American public of his agenda. And if he can't keep on message, and if he undermines people like his attorney general, it's very hard to keep that unified message.
You know, a lot of them come back, Mary, and say, well, you know, they have not exactly made things easier for him by foisting this notion that you have to get health care done first to then go to taxes. There might be very good legislative reasons for doing so, but the president gets frustrated with that process and lashes out. But is it a mutual feeling of disappointment in each? I mean, it's not as if they both have the daggers out for each other at this point, but what are you reading?
Look, this isn't just about Donald Trump. Take, for instance, and I'll answer your question about health care, but just first take the issue of the so-called travel ban. That's an issue of executive power, Neil. That's not just about President Trump. It's about the president who comes after him and the power to control immigration. Trump tweeting that it's a ban, mischaracterizing the legislation, criticizing the attorney general for actually making it something that is, I think, more easily passable through the Supreme Court by making exceptions for, say, green card holders. That's a good thing. So for the president to undermine that is to undermine executive power, and that's
by the way, undermine
concern.
Whatever shot he potentially could have with trying to convince members of the Supreme Court, who he now seems to be saying you're wasting your time on this politically correct version, right?
Yeah, that's right. And also, look at health care reform. Obamacare never had majority support, but since the president rushed through that first bill through Congress, couldn't get his coalition together, again, making statements, not persuading, Obamacare is suddenly becoming more popular. That's crazy, given where prices are going, given the fewer number of choices that people have of doctors. So, look, he is an undisciplined man. He practices the politics of personal pique. We know that about him. But he also likes to win. And if he wants to win on these big agenda items, and somebody's going to have to take that Twitter account and have some kind of strong conversation with him.
But, you know, Mary, I don't really mind the Twitter thing as long as he stays on topic. In other words, if you were tweeting... Right. You know, in the middle of this dust up on what his tax cuts are doing or health care are through, and he's tweeting on top of that, going over the heads of the media community that might be trashing the likelihood he'll ever get that done, that reinforces a message that's positive and more popular than anything else he's been tweeting about. So why doesn't he do that?
Yeah, well, look, he did the same thing with the London Bridge terror attacks.
Right.
He came out with a terrific tweet that said, basically, Britain, we support you, and then he went after the mayor of London. Now, the mayor of London is not our favorite person on the editorial page. He's been far too soft on terror, but
right.
It's really the place of the White House to go after him. It makes the Oval Office look small, I'm afraid.
Now, this could be a temporary thing, and as the Journal has pointed out, and you've been here on multiple visits on this network and others, this notion that that agenda is a positive, economically market-helping agenda. I got the sense from the Journal today that you guys were saying in between the lines, Mr. President, you're risking your own best thing going. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. Again, he was elected as a reform president, and he has a Republican majority for now. But time is running out, and once you get into next year, a lot of congressmen are going to be thinking about the midterm elections, and if he loses that majority in Congress, or politicians start thinking, well, you know, I got to run away from this guy because we can't trust him with the messaging or trust him to back us up, then, you know, effectively the presidency is over.
All right, we should point out that both sides have been sort of pointing the fingers at the other. Obviously, if this drags on, it's going to get more so. How do you see this playing out?
I think the best thing that this Congress could do is to just move forward, ignore what's going on in the Oval Office, ignore the smoke and mirrors of the Russia inquiry, which really, there's no there, and do what they were elected to do, put bills on his desk to sign.
So you don't think this Comey thing, any of that goes any further? He and they should focus on the stuff that got him there.
Absolutely,
right.
And put it on his desk and give him some achievements, give him something to talk about, get his attention off Twitter.
All right, Mary, thank you very much, Mary Kissel. All right, no doubt she'll be hearing from the Never Trumpers in a matter of seconds.